Beth, it's so nice to have a chance to visit with you about your history, your personal history in behavior analysis. You've been a very important person to the history, and we really want to hear about your personal history. Could you tell us what led you to become a behavior analyst? Nobody's born a behavior analyst. They have to get made into a behavior analyst. How did it happen?
Well, I have to say, first of all, that the term behavior analysis did not exist when I was going to school, certainly as an undergraduate. I think it was coined pretty much by Skinner and adapted or adopted by the journal, the Experimental Analysis of Behavior. And at that time, there was no such thing as applied behavior analysis. It did not exist. There was, at the time that I was in about my third year in graduate school, there's an interest in what they call behavior modification. And then we went through lots of combinations and permutations as to what that was. And finally, in 1968, with the publication of the first issue of Java, the term was applied and defined and stuff. So I was there quite a bit before that. So I can't say I became a behavior analyst because I was already into that mode.
Did you, as that time went on, the early behavior modification, did you notice that things were changing, or did it just sort of happen so gradually?
Well, there were probably events that were significant. Certainly, the publication of Skinner's books made a big, big difference. The publication of Fred Keller's book made a difference. Murray Sidman's work. Then later on, Token Economy by Azrin and Ion. So there were a number of very important texts. And then the early journals preceding the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. There were a few other journals, Behavior, Research and Therapy, and other journals that handled articles that related to human behavior, its modification.
Did you have any formal training as a behavior analyst or a behavior modifier or a behaviorist?
Not in terms of coursework at all. It just didn't exist then. I did probably the most formal training I had was from my husband, and that was Beth Sulzer. And Ed had been a student of TC, Columbia Teachers College, had gone over to the experimental program and taken courses. He took a course with Schoenfeld, and that really converted him. All of his earlier work was clinical psychodynamic, but this really clicked. He had a science background. He had been trained as a chemist, and this really appealed to him. And he would come home and tell me about it. At the time, I was teaching school in a poverty area in New York City, and we spent a lot of time talking about why those children behaved the way they did and what we might think about doing to try to improve their performance in school.
So you were a teacher. Did you then go back to school, to graduate school?
I sort of never stopped. I was fortunate enough to go through CCNY, which was and is their school, and we were able to go there free, which meant that I could get a college education. After I finished, the state of New York had a teacher shortage, and so they opened a master's program that you could enroll in for nothing. So I went through all of that, and then Ed had gone to Columbia, and I started taking courses at Columbia myself, but they didn't turn me on. It was very traditional kind of education that I got. Interestingly, and that's about 25 years later or so, my advisor from the University of Minnesota joined the faculty for a while at TC and started teaching behavior analysis.
And who is that?
Jan Duker. I don't know if you've heard of her at all. She actually lives in Texas. But that was probably one of the most reinforcing events in my life because her background had been psychodynamic too.
So, at what point did you really buy into the behaviorist perspective in this process?
Very, very early. Because I started using some of the concepts and applying them in my classroom as a teacher. And I had started by yelling and screaming at these kids because they wouldn't behave and I didn't know how to get them to do it. And then I learned a little bit about shaping and differential reinforcement. And I started using some of them as models for each other. It just turned upside down. And I began to really love teaching. And my students were learning. So the very immediate impact of an effective behavioral approach was wonderful. Then I had my own kids, and they were all perfect.
Of course.
Well,
they are now.
Well.
I think you told me a little bit about this in what you just said, but perhaps you could expand a little bit on what it was like to be a behavior analyst in those early years. As far as other people were concerned, did you have a problem with the other teachers for you? Did they think you were crazy?
No, I didn't have trouble with the teachers in my school because I wasn't using behavioral language or anything like that. I was just trying to apply some of the concepts. I certainly did have difficulties with people at the university who thought I was being dreadful and all the kinds of accusations that used to be hurled at people in the field.
Which university was that?
Well, I went to Syracuse briefly, but I don't think I had any problems there. It was probably at Minnesota in a couple of my courses where people thought that was awful stuff. Mostly the very traditional psychodynamic people. Fortunately, Minnesota was a great place, though, I should say, because they did have a very strong experimental group. We had Ken Corkadale.
I was asking if he was there.
Yeah, he was. In fact, I was his TA. And that's where I really learned the analysis of human behavior inside out and backwards. And we had philosophers of science like Paul Neal, who was accepting of a variety of perspectives. And then there were people over in medical school. Well, Travis Thompson came in, Wells Highwood came in, Bob Orlando, who you probably don't know. You do.
I've seen him.
He did early research with Sid Bijou, and he had come from the University of Washington, and he became my academic advisor. So I had a lot of support. And of course, Ed was on the faculty in medical school at that time. So I was able to pull together a graduate committee who were very supportive of the kinds of things I was trying to
Wonderful
do.
people to work with.
Yeah, they were. They really were.
Great.
Yeah.
Great pedigree there. Can you talk a little bit about what you consider your own contributions that you would like to be remembered for, that you feel best about?
I think the thing that I feel absolutely the best about are what my students are doing. And you know a lot of them. I think a half a dozen are on the board here. Phil was my student, Kent Johnson. There were quite a few of them.
They speak very highly of you and very highly about you in their behavior. Their behavior speaks very well.
They've been doing wonderful things. Mark Elbows I could name maybe 20, 25 people that I feel are outstanding. Now, I will not take full credit for that. I have to credit Greg Ollie, who was my partner at the University of Massachusetts, in a training grant, which allowed us to pick and choose the best of the best. So we started out with people with very good backgrounds and credentials who were on fire to learn this stuff. And all I ever had to do was to go behind them and say, a little bit this good.
A few nudges and some reinforcers and pretty much
that
did
was
it.
it.
It's great. How do you think behavior analysis has changed since you first got exposed to it by Ed Sulzer up until today? What is your sense of the trajectory?
Well, as I said, when he entered the field, it was a very loose, amorphous kind of thing. And the major change came in 68 when the parameters of applied behavior analysis were articulated. It was always data-based, but it was not always experimentally analyzed. So I think that was a very, very important change, that it became a self-assessing, self-evaluating kind of a system, and probably is its strongest property.
And basically you're speaking of the applied area, because the basic area had...
Right. Yes, we talked
analysis.
about applied behavior analysis. The experimental analysis had been, that preceded it by 7-10 years or so. And they had that very strong foundation. But the notion that you could actually apply that with living, breathing, socially interacting people was really quite radical. So I think that was a major change at that point. There's been a lot of directions in evolution, many, many trajectories, the areas of application, the methodology, the experimental analysis, features like functional analysis, many, many different techniques and strategies and general approaches that are being used to make this more refined. The thing that really struck me, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago at the University of Massachusetts, which is where I spent most of my career. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we're completing this revision of behavior analysis for lasting change. And just for the fun of it, I sat down, looked at the references for the first 14 out of 30 chapters, and started making a list of the different areas of application, and reached, at that point, 199. Oh my word. Now, if you ask people in this field how many areas of application there are, I would guess they might say 20, 30, 50. Now, that was 199 when we hit chapter 14. I never counted the rest of them.
It was amazing.
Certainly well over 200. And, well, that makes it impossible to write a book, I can tell you.
Yes, it certainly would be the case, wouldn't it? As you were describing that, it occurred to me for the first time that the experimental analysis of behavior developed some principles and did an analysis with non-human subjects. And then people realized somewhere along the way, such as Ed Sulzer and yourself, that, hey, these principles can be applied to real people in real situations to make their life better. And so they were applied, and that was behavior modification. And then along came Beowulf and Risley, and basically said, you can do analysis with real people too.
That was it.
And it's really a very interesting point that you made. I really appreciate that point. It's never had thought about that before.
Well, it was was really a sea change in a sense, because we had what we call behavior therapy, but that other piece, that self-evaluation, is what gave this field the strength it has, and which I think make practitioners and scientists in the field feel a lot more comfortable about what they're doing. One of the things I just didn't like about teaching and my early training as a psychologist is I try to do things, but I had no idea whether they were doing any good or bad or indifferent. It was a very uncomfortable feeling for me. So for a person like myself, this gave me the clarity and the sense of security about what I was doing. I could look and see, well, were these techniques that we were trying working? Were they working as well as we wanted them to? Did we need to change them? And of course, there's another part of it that we haven't mentioned, but I think it's very important. That's the public nature of it. There's not this business of, well, I'm a clinician and I knew best. That's the way most clinical people work. I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to do, or I'm going to teach, but you will be the recipient, and I will keep my secrets to myself. You're going to get better because I have special knowledge. It took all that power away from people, and it made it very apparent and clear, and anybody could look at that data. Anyone who ethically had could access the data could look and see it on the graphs. Where's that change occurring the way it was supposed to change?
Very, very interesting. Is there anything in your career that you would want to do differently if you were to start over again from where you started from?
I can say that I would. It would be nice to have another 100 years so I could do more.
I'm with you on that. We'll work on it, Beth.
Okay.
What areas of the field now I know that there are over 199 areas of the field, but what areas of the field would you like to see more work being done in? What would you urge students to think about getting into?
Well, I think if you look at levels of social problems, we can start at the top with war and peace, with health and well-being, with disease, infectious disease, those kinds of things that have the broadest impact. The kinds of aspects that relate to improving the quality of life of individuals and societies. Now that's very grandiose.
Why not?
But the concepts are possible, and we've seen them in microcosm where you could change the behavior of people in groups. There was a movement, you'll probably remember, I think in the 1970s to 80s, an ecological movement within our field. It was wonderful because they showed how you can make a difference by saving the environment in many different ways.
I think it was community psychology, I think they were calling it.
Yeah. You don't see a single one of those people, and it's heartbreaking because we're being faced with so much right now. I'm not worried about myself, but I sure worry about my grandchildren and their future. Because I think, we've got global warming, we've got infectious diseases, we've got war, we have all kinds of dreadful things that are out there that, at least conceptually, we could do something about. I think the Cambridge Center is probably in the best position to support that. I think we have to make a very, very conservative effort to bring back that excitement and that enthusiasm that we saw in the post-Vietnam Europe. We seemed to go from that to many years where people weren't concerned with themselves and what they could get. That's got to change. I think it needs to change from up there. I don't mean all the way up there, but I mean a little amount of policy, national policy, state policy, professional approaches. We have to reinforce that kind of thing a lot more than we've been doing.
I think a pretty good number of behavior analysts are with you on that. I'm not sure whether anything will get accomplished, but I suspect it eventually will, because once people start saying, this really needs to happen, it gets translated into action somewhere along the way with their students or their students' students.
Oh, I hope so. In a way, we've unleashed a set of contingencies that interfere with that, because as we develop professionalism in this field and the public begins to demand it, the jobs are there and not there.
Well, maybe something can happen to move them. Maybe some wonderful thing will happen and autism will be resolved, and all those people that have some behavior analysis training will need to look for some other kind of work. That would be a wonderful thing for the people with autism and their families as well as...
Well, I think if you have organizations and systems out there that are very, very determined to see change in a major way, maybe some things will come along. I just read a doctoral dissertation from the university, from Perth, I'll tell you the name in a minute. Anyway, the woman had worked with elderly people on health and exercise, and the results were stunning. Just with a very simple feedback system, they were using a counter, and they increased their exercise, and their medical measures improved tremendously. So that kind of thing to me exemplifies the kinds of things that we need to do in these other areas.
Yes, there's so many of them too.
There was Murdoch University.
Murdoch, yeah. That's I think Vicki Lee was there for a long time. I think we met some of the people from Murdoch.
Well, Jay Birnbauer was there.
Yeah.
And now David Leach is there. And he says he's the only one on the faculty, which is sad.
Yeah, it certainly is. What do you see personally as the future of behavior analysis? Sort of just give us a crystal ball look at what you see the future, and some ways down the road, project out.
Well, I guess we're going in a good direction. I worry about it a little bit because demand is so high, and people begin to take shortcuts. What's so hard? I don't know. I see it going in, maybe in the health area. We have enough of these infectious diseases, and we have a major focus on prevention at last. I don't know how long it will keep going, but if that one is there, I think that we should be seeing more in the direction of health and safety and injury prevention. That type of thing.
So we're going to put this interview on the web, and it's going to be available to really anybody that wants to see it. It's going to be freely available on the web. But we also hope that people will use it in the history of behavior analysis courses. Any university that wants to use the material can use it. And we're certainly planning to use it in a course in the history of behavior analysis for ourselves at the University of North Texas. But you have a chance now to send a message to students of the future. What do you want to tell them?
Well, I guess what I want to tell them is to try to look at the big picture, to have a a dream, to fulfill that dream by learning as much as they can about that area that excites them, to apply the principles of behavior analysis to their own behavior so that they keep going and they work hard, they accomplish, and I think we can have wonders. We've seen in this field, we've really seen amazing accomplishments. We've seen treatments of kids with asthma, treatments of children in the dental chair, treatments of other adults with physical ills, with psychological problems. The list just goes on and on. There are instances of excellence in education that we never thought could happen. Those little kids I was teaching in New York could, given the right circumstances, they could become anything that they want. And we have the mechanisms to do it. So I guess what I'm saying to people in the future is, if you have a dream, then follow it by learning, by getting the best current support you can, by organizing the kinds of reinforcers you need, either by doing it for yourself or bringing in other people to help you. I sort of took that approach in my graduate training. I think that's why so many of these people are doing wonderful things. They just followed their dream and got the kind of support that would allow them to begin to get there.
Beth Sulzer-Azaroff, I can see why you were a wonderful teacher. You inspired your students to be what they could be.
Well, thank you.
And we appreciate that. Every one of us who have experienced their knowledge.
I have to say, too, I've seen quite a few of your students, and they're wonderful, too. So you must be doing a lot of good things with them.
Yeah, thank you very much.